Bill, you're on mute.
You're on mute, Bill.
On June 16th, Governor Baker signed into law an act extending certain COVID measures adopted during the state of emergency. This act includes an extension until April 1st, 2022 of the remote meeting provisions of his March 12th, 2020 executive order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. And we're being recorded, and the agenda is for both police and fire, and we will start with the fire department. I have the presentation ready to load. When the
Terrific. We'll just take a roll call. George,
Here.
Robert,
I am here.
Nate,
Here.
I am here clearly. And unfortunately, Jack is unable to make it, and our chair is on an extended medical leave, so he will not be with us as well. That being said, I think we can, I'll just check in real quick with Deputy Chief Lennon. Still need a few more minutes, so can we?
No, he is here. I'm promoting him to panelist now.
Oh, okay.
He's getting on now.
Too bad, Chief Sawyer. So close.
I'll buy you lunch, John.
All right, there's Chief Frederickson.
So to both police and fire, I have the slides ready to share. So as soon as you're ready, I'll share them and advance them as you needed.
Yeah, Chief Frederickson, do you need a minute or are you ready to present? If not, we can go with the fire department. You're on mute. You're on mute, Chief Frederickson. I'm not a good lip reader, but it does look like you're saying you're not ready.
No, I did not say that. I am
You
ready.
did, okay.
24/7. Let's go.
All right.
So how do you want to do this?
You should
Right.
see the presentation now.
Perfect.
So as soon as you're ready, Chief.
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right.
I think you all had an opportunity to look at the mission statement. It's kind of short and sweet. We have a more involved one if you wanted us to send it to you, but this fits in the slide nicely and it really encapsulates what we do. So we can move, if anybody has any questions on that, you can. What we did, what you see here is a general synopsis of the call for service for 2021. I know we were asked by Mr. Perkins for a 10-year analysis of a comparative, and we do have that, but I can email that to you. Officer Giamacco put that together. It's basically the same snapshot over the past 10 years. Some of them are different because the way we recorded overdose calls 10 years ago is different than we do now. So for that particular category, when I send those to you, they'll look much different. But you really, if you look about 2014 and beyond, we started keeping them consistently. But there's a general snapshot of some of the incidents that we deal with. If anybody has any questions on these numbers, I know you've taken a look at them. They don't tell the whole story, but they really are just a snapshot.
Yeah, Chief, thank you for answering George's question. That's appreciated. I think I had one other, which was just, are these all service or are they workload calls, and like, are the calls kind of duplicated? Do you have any deduplicated numbers?
Well, they are calls that are logged in through dispatch.
Mhm.
They're a mishmash. They can be deceiving at sometimes. When you think of, if you call it a call for service, the general public would think that that's how many times citizens called the town of Yarmouth Police Department because they had a problem. That's not necessarily the case. Those could be a lot of different. When an officer goes out of service, sometimes, for example, if their car broke down and they got to get towed, that would be registered as a calls for service.
Mhm.
Sometimes when they're in training, that can be registered as a call for service. There's a bit of inconsistency on how that's logged in, but generally speaking, it's everything that patrol does, not necessarily, it doesn't include most investigations because they operate differently. when a detective's out there doing a lot of different follow-ups and at the time, if they're not out at a residence, they don't really call it in. If they're on the phone calling, doing the different things they do, if they're on a surveillance, those really don't get logged in this manner. That big number, 33,824, that includes all of those other numbers you see. For example, traffic stops. Of that, there's 4,622 traffic stops. That's included in the total number. I don't know if that helps you at all.
Yeah, I mean, it does a little, and working, in the nonprofit world, I absolutely am familiar with the challenges of data and deduplicating it. So I understand if you don't have this, but I definitely would be curious to know just, aside from those sort of, something's broken down and, the workload type of things, and duplicated, there's 3 calls about an accident but there's only 1 accident. Like, how many incidences of actual, crime or suspected crime, I guess would be kind of the question. Do you have any metrics or any way of tracking that?
Yeah, there are some other ways that we have to file reports with the FBI, the UCR reports. Those can go, those are tricky too, because again, like you just said, the numbers can be funny because there could be like multiple crimes in one offense, but you can only report 1 offense.
Right.
Because you could have a sexual assault of 1 person and a homicide all in 1 call and only be counted as 1 offense.
Yeah.
So it is tricky, but they give you a snapshot, a little bit of a flavor of what's going on. And sometimes, unfortunately, it takes that sit down and go over and answer specific questions. We have lots of data, and you know how we can twist data any way we want to make it seem one way or the other. But we gladly try to, if there are specifics, we can try to get them for you. Yep.
Chief, this is George Perkins. I'm just curious whether or not you could provide instead the uniform crime statistics. I mean, it's just, you're right. Anybody can play games with statistics, but as long as we have definitions that are universally accepted, then we know what we're talking about. Yes, I understand that measurement is a problem, but so if you actually had that data, that would be probably more useful. I mean, I'm just trying to get a sense of what your workload is, that's all. And for example, the numbers we have in front of us, although informative, don't tell you very much unless you can compare it with other periods. So, are things going up? Are things going down? Is something spiking? Is there an explanation for that? For example, the theme of your slides here talk about calls for service declining because of COVID, but then you report 4 categories, more than 4 actually, that are rising. So it's just, well, can we explain that? Would that have happened without COVID? Did that happen because of COVID? There's no way to infer that from the data you've given us. That's all.
Yeah, no, I get you. And, we recently put out some of our burglary statistics for this year. They're at all-time lows. Burglary statistics. You don't have those. I put them on our Facebook page. But that's been going down significantly for the past, since 2010, at a time when we had, in 2010, we had 317 house breaks. All right. 2021, I think it was 17, somewhere in that number. That is a massive reduction, a 90-something% reduction in house breaks. Now, I personally am going to take all the credit in the world for that. I think it was because of me, but that's really not the case. There are a lot of factors that go into why that is. And we tried to explain that. Now, this particular past year, it certainly, you've got to factor in the fact that COVID kept more people at home. So the odds of someone breaking into a vacant home would diminish. So how do we have it? It's it's kind of hard to like, we're kind of a guesswork in that as far as that
Well,
goes.
now you can see why it would be important to see the data for the last 10 years. We
Oh,
know
yeah.
the years that COVID was affecting what was happening, but what was
Yep.
happening in the years without COVID?
That's right. And the interesting thing on the burglaries, I'd like to say that it was because everybody's at home. But if you see like the drop, like 2010, 317 house breaks. 2011, 261, 2012, 248, 2013, 215, 2014, 203, 2015, we went down to 105. And it continued to scale down. This year's numbers were not far off from last year's number, which were record lows. Now, we also had COVID last year, but they weren't that much different than 2019. So there's a lot of factors that go into that. You look at the alarms that people have, video, those types of things. Our neighborhood crime watch has done a great job communicating in neighborhoods. We do business checks every night. Every night in this town, 3 officers go to a particular business in town, and they leave a night check card. So it shows that they're out there. Those are preventative patrols. It may seem like there's not much going on, but that's what they're doing when they're out there.
Yeah, if I may, Chief, because I don't want us to get too hung up on, you're only on the first slide, but I think what I hear George saying, and I would share this, is that it's not that we doubt that, it's just that we kind of have to rely on getting it from you. And it's nice to just have something that shows us the totality of what your workload is, what are some of the numbers, and what is it looking like compared to historical times. So it's something that, if you have the data, I think it would be helpful as a follow-up. I think it would probably be helpful as we go into next fiscal year, the next budget cycle a year from now. Unless there's any other comments from George, I don't want to get us too hung up on this particular
Okay.
slide.
That's my point. We're just trying to understand what's going on. That's all.
Yeah. You know what might be even better once we're done with this process, if any one of you want to come in, and we'll put a couple hours, we'll get right in front of the computer, and we will go right through the numbers for you. It's hard to give you one report because you're gonna have questions on those reports. So I gladly sit down with the team, go through and show you every number we got, and I think it'll make a lot of sense, and it'll give you a really true representation of what we're doing.
Yeah, maybe both, and because it is important to be able to interpret the data, right? Not just to look at it without context. So I appreciate that. But please, continue with your presentation.
Okay. Okay, I think those blended in with the previous slide, some of the different challenges we are facing. We get some recruitment issues that are coming up, particularly in the dispatch area. It's hard to get them. We're currently looking for 2 people. We put a post out looking for academy trained people for police officers position. We got not nearly the response that we typically would have gotten like 2 or 3 years ago. We were able to get two officers hired. They were in the process of getting those positions filled, but it is slim pickings at this point. Our traffic complaints, that is, we deal with them all the time. We've made some shifts in how we do that with Sergeant Carcetti, who has been assigned to manage all the traffic reports. We've also reassigned 2 people during the summer to just handle those traffic issues. And right now we have 1 person assigned. That's his primary function. That's all he does is traffic. And it seems to have helped because that it's one of the biggest complaints we get in town, and we can actually directly communicate with individuals and try to resolve their particular issues. One of the big areas that's happening is fraud and white collar crime and computer related issues. It's amazing. Our whole investigative strategies have changed. We recently took a drug detective position and turned it into someone that just does technology-driven investigations. Not just investigating technology crimes, but using technology to help solve crimes. It is a part of what we need to do. It's very time consuming to get someone trained in that. If you don't have it, you're behind the curve. And it's, again, that would be a pretty amazing thing if, when you come in and look at the numbers, we can explain all the different aspects of what that does and where we're going in 21st century policing. Okay, the budget you see here, the numbers are the numbers. We are given instructions on our budget. We try to follow them as best we can. We try to incorporate all of the contractual changes that come about. That's kind of basically it. We fall within the guidance that is given to us. If you can see, there's one thing that says, are we on track for our budget this year? No, we're not. And there are reasons for this particular year where it'd be more concerning than others, and mostly in the area of overtime. The way the contract was changed this particular year is heavy on a transition due to vacation time changes. So it'll be a little bit complicated this year. Plus, we are contending with COVID, much like the fire department. It seems like over the past month, it's been one after another that's out. And every time they're out, we got a replacement cost to go along with that.
So Chief, may I ask a follow-up to that then?
Yes.
So with the overtime, first, do you have an expectation of how much over budget you would be on that, and what we might, need to make up for as we close out the fiscal year?
Yeah, we're going to put that together. We have some documents. We have to sit down with the team and look at and try to project what we got, see what type of time is left. This is the contractual changes really hit home this year as far as the time off go. So it's a different mechanism. We've switched to a calendar year time off as opposed to a July 1st change. So it's made it tricky this year. So we should be able to, within the next 2 weeks, have a good handle on kind of where we're going. Because we have already made changes. We've cut staffing, we've reduced supervisory staffing, which we don't like doing, but unfortunately, to try to make it work, we have to. I know we talked with the town administrator that we will give him some projection on where we think we will be. I don't think it's going to be a extremely high number, but we need to get a handle on to see what supplemental pieces might go in. The good news is that next fiscal year, the way the budget sets up, it looks like it's going to be about as good as we've had it in a while. That will be a little more manageable. Plus, the changes in the shift schedule should start hitting home a little bit more. Right now, we have 4 people on the new schedule. We got the 2 new ones, will be 2 additional. And then as we go through attrition, that will just continue to improve. By the end of the year, we'll have at least 2 more positions that will be replaced. So every time we do that, that's about 15 more shifts a year we gain, depending on who gets replaced. So, and when you equate that into dollars, that's so it should be a much better year next year.
So my follow-up to that would be for Bob and Bill, just if we could, as the finance committee, be kept in the loop on that. And, I certainly would, understanding that there's going to be overtime challenges. I think just for us to be able to get a sense of what we need to be looking at down the line, it would be terrific to kind of build in, whether it's quarterly or, mid-year, sort of check-in points to measure how we're doing on that, do any kind of projections. I think it would just be helpful for the finance committee to have that information moving forward. But that's the only other question I had relative to the overtime for this year.
Any other questions on this particular slide? All right, this breaks down where some of those changes were made to the budget this year. the salary was up $258,000. That was with all the contractual changes that were done, basically 2% COLAs for across the board for pretty much everybody. The overtime was added back in. We were cut last year, the $50,000. It was put back in to the budget, which is very helpful. Also with PAC and training, that was brought up to another level. And it's not like we're getting more. It basically keeps up with the cost of living, and it really, if you do the math, it really doesn't. Over the past 5 years, we haven't factored in the changes in salaries and overtime rates with the overtime budget. It actually has reduced, and was complicated that further. Most of our drug investigation money that went through a grant that got eliminated 2 years ago. So it's made it more challenging to get by to do drug investigations. However, we did make a change recently. We just had someone that's been assigned to the DEA Drug Task Force. With that, the benefit of that is we get a force multiplier with the agencies. They're based right out of Barnstable Village. We have more staff that can help us with our issues. We love the philosophy of the new SAC that's in charge of the office there. He is a former local police officer who understands the need to keep things local and work together. And the nice piece of that, along with it, it comes with some built-in overtime that will help us along that we wouldn't have had before. So it's a nice piece that we think is going to help us along and for the foreseeable future. Our expenses, most of all of that was a result of contractual changes over the past 2 contracts that were never added into the budget. It's still a bit short, but we've been like that. We have to constantly, towards the end of the year, juggle pieces around to make it fit. For example, because we've been unable to get new cruisers, our tires get worn out quickly. We're using old cruisers that they're not as sound as they typically would be with a new cruiser, because they get banged around quite a bit. So consequently, the tires wear out very quickly. So we superseded our tire budget about 2 months ago, and with less than half of the year, we already spent all the money on tires. So we have to remove money from somewhere else to put tires on cruisers. So those are some of the explanations for that. If anybody has questions on that, we gladly answer.
Any questions for the chief on that?
Chief, could I just take it back to the salary line? What's PAC? I just don't know.
Proactive Anti-Crime Unit.
Oh, all right. Okay.
Yep. Okay, so here's some of the challenges, and some of them I've already mentioned. We're COVID-19, that's across the board. I think everybody's got that. But with us in public safety, same true with the fire department. We have to put the staff out there, and it's hard to manage. And even like with dispatch, it's even more critical because we only have 8 dispatchers in the department. So when they go out with COVID and you have a place where they're all working together and maybe someone's spreading it in their workspace, they use the same workspace, it's very challenging to keep that clean. We've taken some actions within the building to lock it down to try to keep them as healthy as possible. But the way things have moved, we've had, I think, 3 dispatches since December that have come down with COVID. So we really struggled. Plus we had a retirement and another dispatcher leaving to become a police officer. So we're down 2. So you take 3 out of the 6 that were healthy, you only had 3 dispatches. It was a struggle for about a 5-day period. We do have some police officers who are qualified to do dispatch, so we had to move a lot of pieces around to do that. Retirements, we've had a bunch of retirements over the past year, and we got a couple more coming up this year, including me. So police reform has created other unfunded mandates for us. We are working through those. Even through COVID has impacted our training where we can't do it in the manner we used to. We're doing it online. It's not effective, but it's caused us to change the way we do it. We can't assign people a week at a time. It's very complex on how we do it. It's got some benefits to it, but on the other hand, the training is not as dynamic as it can be when you do in-person training. We talked about unanticipated costs of people out injured. We have one officer going out for a significant shoulder surgery, I think next week, going to be out for 6 months to replace a shoulder, and hopefully he comes back healthy. We have another officer who is out right now with some unknown ailment that's being worked on. A lot of different procedures being done to define what that is. Hopefully, the officer is okay. It's not a job-related issue, but it's certainly a concerning issue. When you don't have the staff, and we're down 2 officers right now that'll be replaced very soon, probably by mid-February. They will go through their 12 weeks of field training because I hate to say it, but we got 2 trained officers from other departments to come to work for us. So it's good for us, not good for the other departments because it leaves them in a deficit. We've been challenged this particular fiscal year with the COLAs. They haven't matched the overtime increases. So we discussed that earlier, but I think we're going to catch up on that in FY23 a bit. The cruises have been a real problem.
Chief, can I just pause and ask you a question about that? The
Yeah.
COLA.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying. Is it that you have to, with overtime, you are required under the union contract to pay the COLA increase, and that the budget that's appropriated for overtime does not match that? Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. We've been
Okay.
flat funded for overtime for 4 or 5 years, and even
Okay.
actually reduced. But then the COLAs all went up, so your ability to deploy people at the same rate, you can't do it.
Gotcha. I just want to make sure I was understanding that correctly. Thank you.
Cruises are a major issue. We got cut the last 2 years quite a bit. Matter of fact, 1 year we got none. We managed to salvage 2 cruiser purchases out of some insurance money that we had to do some hunting for, but we got them. Those cruises are on order. We have no idea when they will come in because Ford stopped making cruises, and because of the chip problem, et cetera. We did get notified they're going to start taking the orders again. We are working with Capital on a plan to have a more solid replacement schedule coming up. But even with that, the cruises haven't been replaced, and we got 1 hybrid cruiser, which they all will be hybrid moving forward. The problem with that, it's broken down several times, and the problem with that is there's not a lot of people that know how to fix a hybrid. They're still in the learning phase too at the local Ford dealers. Our mechanics can only do so much with them. So that's a real issue. I talked about our grant that's for drug investigation that was removed. What else?
And Chief, just to follow up on that, is it that the grant is no longer available, or that you just weren't able to qualify for it this year?
No, that's been 2 years now. We haven't had that grant. It wasn't that we didn't qualify. They eliminated the grant.
They eliminated the grant. Okay,
It was a justice grant. Yeah.
got it. Thank you.
All right. Any questions on the slide? Okay, recommendations. You had a chance to take a look at this. Even though our expense budget has been improved this year to at least accommodate the contractual changes, there are some changes that don't get equated in. For example, our computer-aided dispatch, that goes up 5% a year. We have no control over it. It's just the way it is. And that goes along with some of the other items that in town. We buy things and we can't control the prices. And of course, everybody knows what inflation is doing right now. Where that's gonna go, I don't know, but I think 25 grand in our expense budget would certainly go a long way to at least make us breathe a little bit and not have to make tough decisions on what we do and don't buy. We've talked about creating an account for new hire uniforms, and I think it's a good idea. We've talked about it at the Finance Committee for the past several years. I think the Select Board, they agree with us. It's a good idea. It would be great for police and fire to have a free cash amount of money available to purchase uniforms that are necessary for the fiscal year, because it's unpredictable how many people we might have. We can guess that we might have 3 openings one year, but it could be 5, it could be 6. 2018, we lost 3 officers and they were totally unexpected. And we don't have that type of money in the budget, particularly if we got to put them through the academy. There's added expense to that as well. So it would be ideal if there was a separate free cash amount of money set aside that we could dip into without impacting our, certainly it's almost always level funded expense budget. The gaps in overtime, that really is something that needs to be addressed. I think I do appreciate the way the budget's shaping up for FY23. It looks like we're getting to a point where it's becoming a bit more manageable, particularly as the schedule changes in the favor of cutting that number. So that gap is getting closer. We are looking to add a part-time finance person. I know there was a question on that. Our payroll is not the 8 million. We do somewhere between $1 million, $1.5 million in details that also get processed. The amount of time off slips this one person does, it's very complicated. Our system doesn't fully work with the Munis system in town. It doesn't all work together. It's very complicated. Cheryl Jacobson, who's the only one that does it, she does it on the weekends because it has to be in by, I think, 11 a.m. on Monday, and payroll ends. She starts prepping it on Saturday, comes back in on Sunday and tries to get it all up and ready, and she's done a great job. But for her, she never gets a weekend off, and it just doesn't happen. She can't. There's no one else to do it. There's no one at town hall that can do it, and it's one of those things that you can't just show someone once how to do it. It's the old law of use and disuse. If you don't do it constantly, you're going to lose how to do it.
So, Chief, how do other towns handle that?
Good question. I don't know. I don't know exactly. My guess is through their finance departments, it's there's probably more assistance there. And I know finance, they don't have a lot of personnel either. But my guess would be where it would fall to. So our solution would be to get a part-time person to consistently help out to make sure it worked. Now, gladly work with finance if that was a shared position that they could work there as well. I know they are always looking for, are always short on help. But for us, like if she was out, she just had major surgery. We allowed her to work from home through her surgery, which was like, I can't thank her enough for what she did. I don't know what we would have done if she was just out. If she resigned tomorrow, we would all be scrambling to get things done. And this is not a new problem. We brought this up many times in the past, but I don't understand why it's so complicated. I wish I knew. But it's something that should be addressed. We've worked with IT to try to smooth things out. We've worked with different vendors with our IMC product that does community dispatch, scheduling, time, all these different things. We've made some improvements, but it's still very, very complicated.
Yeah, it doesn't sound super sustainable to have it all living with one person and certainly if there are any other kind of requests for assistance from other departments, it would make sense from an economies of scale standpoint to consolidate. Okay, thank you.
All right. Dispatch is another issue. We've put this out for a long period of time that we really could use a dispatch supervisor. We have 8 dispatches. We don't cover 2 dispatches 24/7. We have a mostly, we always have 2 during between 8 in the morning and 3 in the morning, but there is a gap on the midnight shift. But along with the dispatch supervisor, one thing we don't do enough of is quality control and managing the grants. That falls to a lieutenant to get that done, who works, we get one of our positions paid for through the 911 grant, and also the training that's required for the dispatches each year that's done mostly through grant process. There's a lot of paperwork that gets down to the penny, and we get rejected. The deputy worked on that for a number of years. Thank God he's got another lieutenant doing it now for him. And it is very complicated. There's a lot of maintenance that has to happen with our CJIS issue, CJIS compliance that has to take place. That's criminal justice information system, where we enter stolen property, missing persons, running plates, all the different 911 requirements. It's a lot of work, and that a dispatch supervisor would be a much welcome position. And then the last thing on the list there is to fund the shooting trailer. I know that isn't on our operational budget, but it is something that we're looking to get completed. It is documents I think we sent you. It's phase 4 of the Stronger Shield project that has been totally funded by donation. And I encourage you to come down and take a look at what we've done. The first phases 1, 2, and 3 are completed. Phase 4 is the shooting trailer, which will be a 25-yard self-contained trailer that'll be in the backyard. It has 2 lanes that we could use to do our qualifications. It will change the dynamic of how we do our annual 3 times a year training that we need to do, we're required to do. We can do it right in our backyard in a much more controlled environment. The cost of the trailer is somewhere in the vicinity of $650,000. The Yarmouth Police Foundation has committed to $300,000 of that. So we are looking for funds to complete the project, which would be somewhere in the area of $350,000.
Yeah, and I think you probably saw in with my questions on it, I think just to be able to make an informed decision and recommendation, not saying that we wouldn't support it, but from my perspective, it really would help to have a memo that kind of outlines, here's what was phase 1, and here's, how it was paid for, phase 2, phase 3, what are future phases, right? Like, again, having that totality of the picture would really help us, not just in, thinking about how to pay for, recommend funds for that, but also thinking about if they're going to be anticipating future capital needs as well. So that's just, I'd say, if you're coming back to us next year, and I didn't realize it was a super out there that you were going to be retiring. So, whomever it is that's coming back, Deputy Chief, whomever, we'd love to have it in that, format with that level of detail. I think it would really help both our committee and probably Capital as well, to really get a handle on that.
Yeah, I know Assistant Administrator Scott is big on doing the right presentations, and he's wicked smart. So I'm gonna get him all the information and work with him and get it to you. And it's important that you understand the why we need it, the why, and what it really entails, and in what it will do to have us do the best we can do as far as our training goes. And of course, the way our, the post commission is set up, the strict requirements that we are under, and the service we have to give our citizens is on us to make sure we give the officers the right tools to be the best they can be. And I gladly put together a presentation and get that done.
That would be terrific.
If I may, Madam Chair, this one was recommended by the CIP committee with the match as the chief had indicated.
It was this year?
I believe so. If you want to refer to your committee wants to refer to their CIP reports, there were two options. One of the options was if vehicles were leased and other steps were taken, we could move it down the list, but I think this made the list. I can send that to you before the end of the meeting, but I don't want to break up the presentation. And
Okay, all right, so I,
Okay,
for some reason, was thinking it wasn't on the list for this year. So then I guess the sense of urgency in terms of timing would be, you know, moved up in order to help us with that, that vote. So again, you have the sort of format we'd be looking for that in, and anything on top of that you'd want to do would be terrific, but you know, at minimum that. So, okay, so at this point, do you have anything else you want to add before we open it up to the committee for other questions?
No, that's pretty much it. I know the deputy's itching to talk, so I'm sure he can answer a lot of the questions as well.
Deputy, did you want to jump in?
Well, Stephanie, just back to your point about the calls for service numbers, and you mentioned like an accident. If we receive 10 911 calls for an accident, it only goes in the system once. So we do not
Okay.
get, we do not enter duplicate calls for B&Es or accidents or anything like that. Our dispatchers put one call in and then pull one accident number. So that 33,000 number that you see, there would be no duplicate 911 calls or you know, suspicious persons or anything like that. We put one call in for each incident that happens.
That's terrific for letting me know. Thank you. Members of the committee, other questions for Chief Frederickson or Deputy Chief Lennon?
if I may, it is on the list for the firearms trailer, and there is the list right in front of you. It made the first cut. I think what they did is recommended tax levy, free cash, and a match. It is the blue line, which is the last one on the list if you don't do leasing vehicles and things like that, if everybody can see that.
Great, thank you, Bill. Yeah, you know, and just again, my understanding is, you know, I've only been on the committee for less than 2 years. So, but just based on previous conversations, it's historically, there's been a desire amongst committee members just to want to understand again, how many phases are there? You know, what else can we be expecting? What are the sources of funding? So that would be super helpful to have ahead of our vote. So, you know, Chief, if you and Bill can maybe work on the timing of that, it would be appreciated.
Sure, I can help.
Other questions? I mean, I have a few that are still left, but I don't want to, I always try not to filibuster.
Let me just raise one. Is there, I think you're going to ask this anyway, Stephanie, but is there any of the things you do, probably training, and I'm thinking of this trailer, that could provide services to other towns? Could we train their people because we're good at it? Or the trailer, could that be used by other towns? I have a feeling that if we only have to qualify 3 times a year and we've got 45 officers, it's not going to be used every day by Yarmouth. Is there some way to generate revenue for the town by the use of either our training staff or this trailer or anything else you can think of?
Yeah, and if I could just add on to that, Chief, just so you understand where this question is coming from. You know I asked you a similar question, you know, last year, but that was, you know, I think now we've been hearing more and more from different departments about staffing challenges. You know, we hear from that other towns across the Cape are facing staffing challenges as the housing crisis worsens. It's going to be something that if we look 5-10 years out, there are going to be municipalities around us, and maybe even in some instances us, that we can't maintain the same level of services. And so in some ways there's potentially an opportunity for us to position ourselves if if a nearby town needs something that we do really well and we can offer that service. Thinking about that, we just kind of want to start generating that conversation. We're asking it of all department heads, and even if you don't necessarily have an answer right now, if it's something that you think of 3 months from now or 6 months from now, that was something that the committee would be interested in hearing.
Okay. The shooting trailer, it would not be my recommendation that we try to use as an income generating option, only because there's maintenance that goes along with it. People have to be trained. The instructors have to be tested a couple times a year to make sure their lead levels are normal. I just don't think it's a robust thing where we can run a lot of different departments through it. For us, it works well. For the SWAT team, I think they can get their qualifications out of the way regionally. And then if there was a department, let's say Dennis hired one officer that just needs to get his training done in the middle of January, and there's no other option, they can come and use the range. I wouldn't do that. I'm not sure that I would want to put it out there as a renting the trailer. I just don't. I would rather keep it maintained to our satisfaction. Now, the Gannon Training Center out back, that is a regional. Some of the donations that came through with that, especially one big one of $300,000, that was meant to be a regional center. So, is there potential to do something? I would take a look at that more so than the shooting trailer. But I would, we get services from other towns too that they don't charge us. So like accident reconstruction, for example, an officer from another community would come over and take care of our recon, and they don't send us a bill, and vice versa. When we work through the law enforcement council, there's a lot of different things. For example, a search team for a missing person, the Cape people come to us and help us, and vice versa. We go help them as needed. So there's a lot of that mutual type thing. I think the fire department works much the same manner, where they have a nice mutual aid package where they move down the chain to get services that other departments need at times of emergency. So I hope that answered your question. My instinct would be that I don't think the shooting trailer would be something we'd want to routinely let other departments use. I don't think it would be our benefit.
Yeah, I recall you saying that last year, and I think that was just an example.
Well, we have done things in the past. Matter of fact, we had a pretty robust training program where our officers were creating their own classes because they had the certification to do so. And we were putting on classes, charging other departments. We had a revolving account within the department, but we haven't done that in a number of years. It gets complicated, and quite honestly, I'm not sure that, even though we had the okay through the town administrator at that time to do it, I'm not sure it was the proper finance way to do it. But we've been creative on certain things like that.
I think the chief could sell a book of poems.
Yeah.
And along with like a farming handbook,
Yeah.
the town can take a royalty off the top.
Yeah, well, there's some potential there.
Chief, the
Good.
response begs the question, though, if this is to be a Yarmouth-only asset, what do other towns do to get this firearm training? Do they have their own trailers?
The town of Barnstable has a trailer that won't be as big, that they do some qualifications in. It's been there for 25 years. It's not up to the standard it should be, but they do use it. The town of Bourne just built a brand new police facility. They built a 5-lane shooting range in the basement of their building, which
Okay.
would be ideal. It's absolutely, when we built our station, it was like, wow, look at this place, right? But I went up to the Bourne station. I was up there last week for training, and it really is, it's like an evolution when things just keep getting better. It's stunning, beautiful, well done by town of Bourne. Not that we did a great job here, as all the contracting was shoddy. We're going through that right now with our HVAC system. I can show you my office with the ceiling down. They're putting that in now. We're working through that, but we have a pretty solid, strong facility that is, once we get this straightened out, we should be in pretty good shape. But Bourne does that. Other departments, they go to outdoor ranges like we do. We go to Bass River Rod and Gun. We rent stuff. The problem with that is we have to let them know ahead of time, like 2 months. It has to go to their board to get permission to use it on certain days to make it fit. So we get a little stuck on the dates. We can't do our night shooting there because we have limited times when we can do it. That's one of the requirements for the MPTC that we have to qualify for. We do our best to simulate night firing. We do some other non-shooting drills to help us with that. But it's a bit complicated. You'll see that ranges across the Cape are being shut down. For example, you look at Joint Base Cape Cod. We can't shoot a bullet out there. We started this regional police academy out there with the idea that is a perfect environment to set up police training, because you have everything, one-stop shopping. You have buildings, classrooms, you have a track you can do your driving on. They have a swimming pool. They have an amazing gym, and they have ranges that you can go out there. But the reality is, living through it and what we've done, we can't do any of that. The only thing they're allowing us to do is the driving on the runway to get our emergency driving qualifications done. We can't use any of the ranges. It's too complicated. It doesn't make any sense to us at all, but that's just the reality. We can't really use the barracks to house people to go to the academy there. It just doesn't meet the need, the models of a military base, which we can understand. Part of the problem is the complexity of the base itself. It's called Joint Base Cape Cod for a reason. It has multiple parties that call it home, and the lines cross, and there's different rules for each branch of the service, and it's constantly morphing. Selectman Forrest, he intimately knows the workings of the base. We've done our best to make it work, but it's probably, we just can't. Like I said, there's a 15,000 acres out there, and we can't shoot a bullet on it. So, and then locally, you get encroachment issues. Matter of fact, we did academy training up in Mashpee at their range. The neighbors complained so much, and so we've been banned from using their range. So that's the reality.
NIMBYism knows no bounds. So Chief, I think part of this too is, again, thinking, if this occurs to you 3 months from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, what have you, but just thinking about if there was a strategic investment in some area within your department, if there's something that, you think of, hey, you know what, if we had X, we could do Y, and you know what, we could maybe do that for some other towns, that could potentially be a revenue generator. Just something to think about. Again, you don't have to answer it right away, but it is something I think that we're going to keep asking the question and keep getting the conversation going and the wheels turning on it, because A, we need to be looking at other sources of revenue, and B, these consolidations are, in my view, inevitable. So we, as one of the larger towns in the Cape, ought to position ourselves appropriately.
Okay. I
So-
did consider putting a drive up, a soft serve device in the records division. You can, there's the windows right there. And I think that would work well.
Yeah, it'll be like
That's
coffee
just
with the
me.
chief, coffee with the chief, only it'll
Right,
be
there
soft
you
serve
go.
for the chief.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions for Chief Frederickson or Deputy Chief Lennon?
If I may, Madam Chair, the shooting trailer I indicated, it was the breakdown was 25% tax levy, 25% free cash, and then 50% match, which I think the chief indicated. And the rest of their capital is essentially replacement of equipment. They have the cruiser replacement, the mobile computers, the tasers, all which scored well, the body worn cameras, all which scored well in the CIP. So I just wanted to update you on that as we go through the process.
Do committee members have questions as it relates to capital spending for the department? Okay. Terrific. So one other question, just being sensitive of time, there are a couple other questions that weren't answered, but we can do some follow-up at a later point. I think it's just, again, getting a handle on what future expenses we can expect when it comes to, for example, I'm just looking through my notes here real quick. Body cam, unanticipated cost, et cetera. But given that we have Chief Simonian here, I'm hoping that actually for my last question, I could ask him to join this last question conversation, which is, you're both talking about a need for dispatch supervisors. You both kind of talk about in your presentation challenges around dispatch. I know it's not super common, but my question is there any potential, maybe it's several years down the line, but is there any potential of combining that dispatch under one roof? Maybe it's like when and if there's a, new police station or a new fire station that, maybe we look at some point doing, a complex the way Mashpee does, and there's some sort of, joint dispatch. Is there any potential for that, or what are your general thoughts on that?
I think it should have been done long ago. That's the way I look at it. I think it's much easier than we think. It's a cultural change for both police and fire. I mean, we only have to look up to town of Barnstable and town of Sandwich. They've got combined police and fire dispatch. Just to quantify with Barnstable, they have they do Hyannis Fire and Barnstable Police together. They don't do the whole town because they have what, five
Five
departments?
fiefdoms? Yes.
So they're, if you look at the numbers, they are relatively close because of, I know Yarmouth is a very busy fire department with, especially with all the medical runs. They just seem like they happen like every hour. There's another one, and sometimes it's 3 or 4 at once. So there's a lot of that, but you look at Barnstable PD, they are twice the size of us. They generate twice the size of the calls we have, and you can throw those numbers together. So is it doable? Yes. And I think the number of staff is already in place to do that. I think there are some options with the infrastructure of how it works. I think, we put plans before the selectmen. We have a study that was done that indicates it should be done. We had a regionalization process that took place about 8 years ago with all the police and fire chiefs. First time you've ever seen police and fire chiefs agree on something, to have one large regional center. That is certainly pie in the sky. That can be done.
I remember that. That was the issue with the sheriff's department.
Absolutely.
I remember that. Yeah.
So yeah, it's there. It can be done. But again, I know Chief Simone and I are stubborn people. So we have our different opinions on how it would look. But I think the reality is, it's, you put egos aside, you just get it done. And it's easy for me to say because I'm walking out the door in a few months. But it's something I have a passion for, that my personal opinion, it should be done. You just combine our 2 dispatch units together. We have 12 dispatches between police and fire. They could be their own entity operating with your supervision under one roof, combining their ability to do things, understanding how each operation needs to work. And it will take time. It'll take labor relations issues to work through. I think it'll be good for them because I think if fire department will agree, dispatches, we're losing the ability to attract good dispatches because they're not compensated in a way they should. I think if they work together, you can build up a great team. And I think the town of Yarmouth will be better off for it in the long run. So I will shut up right now and let Chief Simonian speak, and Chief Sawyer and the deputy.
Chief Simonian, what do you think about that concept?
Yeah, we've looked at this for several years. Chief Frederickson's absolutely right, and I'm not opposed to combining it all. My biggest problem was we need to be in a hardened facility to protect our 911 system, and we're not in a hardened facility in South Yarmouth, nor is the police station. Neither one of those two buildings are hardened facilities. Okay, my Station 3 in West Yarmouth, which was cited in that regional study as a hardened facility, we have 4,000 square feet upstairs, wide open, to have a new emergency operations center that's protected and a new dispatch center if you wanted to combine them there. And that's where I stand on it. Right now, we're vulnerable. We just had tornadoes go down the road a couple of years ago, and I'm vulnerable here. I'm in the flood zone in South Yarmouth as well. I just want to see the entire 911 system protected, and it's not right now. We're vulnerable in both places.
Yeah, and we were vulnerable when the tornado came through in terms of town records, as I recall, and the flooding that happened in Town Hall.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it would be helpful. I haven't seen that study, so I'd love it if somebody could send it to me. And I think it'd be good to have the conversation maybe with Capital about what actually would need to happen. You know, do you need to have another study, or is it more just a matter of kind of identifying the cost and mapping it out over the next few years, and getting buy-in from everyone else involved, like the selectmen. So, okay. Any other questions for Chief Frederickson and Deputy Chief Lennon before we focus on fire and exclusively? Okay. Well, thank you so much. And Chief Frederickson, when are you retiring? When you said a few months? I thought it was maybe towards the end of this year.
October. I'm on Halloween.
Halloween.
Halloween, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to dress up as a civilian on Halloween. So,
Well, thank you for everything that you've done for this town. I think everyone really appreciates how you've led us through some major crises. You know, kind of been the spirit and the voice of the community in a lot of ways. You know, and I know that you know, it's been a challenging time, but I hope that you feel like your time on the department has been, you know, really rewarding. And I hope to see you out there playing pickleball way better than me this summer.
well, I thank you for that. I love my job. I love the people I work with, and that's what's made it easy. Town has been very supportive through the years and through all the different things we've gone through. And, you know, it'll be missed. And the other thing I know that my second in command here, I call him mine, he's yours, should be right in step lock with what we need to do in the future of the town. We're in good shape. You know, as we've said before, it's not nothing to do with me, but we've been described as we have a deep bench with a lot of people that make an operation run well. We are not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but we, you know, the best description, we got a deep bench, and the future is bright for everybody to move up. So thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Chief Simonian, take it away.
Let me unmute. Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate you meeting with us tonight. As you see on the screen, this is our mission statement. Next slide, please. So as you can see, our call volume has increased over the last, we had a little bit of a lull for the beginning of COVID in 2020. We went down A lot of people were afraid to go to the hospital. But our call volume has jumped back up to be where it needs to be. It's 7,567 calls. That's actual incidents that generated over 10,000 responses because, a car accident, you might get an engine and 2 ambulances responding to that. A structural fire, you'll get 5 or 6 pieces of apparatus. And then just a regular medical call would only be 1 ambulance. But it generates a lot of responses from the 3 stations, but it's only 1 incident number. So we generated 7,567 incidents for either medical or fire responses. The next part of the slide, I'm going to let Deputy Chief Sawyer talk about, since he has been doing a fantastic job with all of our grants, and he's very well versed on it, better than I am.
Thank you. The next item is a SAFER grant. The current SAFER grant that we have now is, it ends January 24th. So we'll be wrapping that up. At the same time, the last 2 days, I've been trying to write the next SAFER grant, which the next SAFER grant will be better because they pay 3 years, 100% salaries and benefits. So the previous SAFER grant would be, they did 75%, 75%, and then 35%. So right now, our last year, we're only getting 35% back from the federal government, but every little bit helps. We got a AFG cardiac monitor grant. That's enough to purchase 5 new cardiac monitors. They're, as you can see, they're very expensive. And these will go into the 5 ambulances. We just were notified last week that we got a grant from the state for a fit test machine. A fit test machine is really small, but really expensive. What this machine does, it can be used anywhere from fitting a N95 mask that properly fits on somebody's face to a Scott mask that a firefighter would wear. So any new firefighter that we hire before going to the academy has to have this fit test certification. And once a year, every firefighter has to have go through this process of have testing. We used to be able to have the Barnesville Fire Academy come in and do the testing for us, but working on somebody else's schedule with a large department that we have, we were always chasing things down trying to get it. So this grant opportunity, it fully funds $19,000 to purchase our own machine, and we'll have better records and be better for it. Then it goes into the challenges. Do you want to take that over, Chief?
Sure. Yeah. So we've had some challenges with COVID, like similar with the police department. We've despite being 2 shots and booster shot, third vaccination booster shot, we've still, unfortunately, myself included, end up getting COVID, and can't really explain it, but it happened. And we've been up and down with personnel. We were down as much as 8 people, I think, at one point. We do have 4, correct me if I'm wrong, I think there's 4 currently out on injury status, either surgery or in work hardening, try to come back to work. So that put us between the COVID and the 4 that are out currently. We were down about 12 people. That's almost a whole shift we were down. So that was a real struggle. And it's reflected in the slides coming up that, our overtime expenditure is a slightly higher than it should be because it's 67%. If you could go to the next slide, Bill, please. Thank you. As you can see, we're on track for the most part, with the exception of our overtime, and we've expended 67% of it. Now, the other token is we're short 50,000 still, similar to what the police was reduced 50,000. We were also reduced, and we were never reinstated that 50,000. So we're reflecting a $50,000 shortage in overtime already. So that has something to do with us being up 67% as well. So we used to be at 922. We're at 872 currently for overtime.
Chief, can I just pause and just
Yes.
clarify something?
Sure.
So again, all the numbers are kind of running together, but so you're saying was the police department's $50,000 cut restored and yours wasn't? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you for clarifying that.
Let me just jump in also, because I'm a little bit confused. It's 67% of the amount after the 50,000 is removed?
So we used to be at a $922,000 figure for overtime for the fiscal year. We
Okay,
were reduced to 872,
okay.
and we still are at 872.
So
So
it's-
we're already 50 behind where we should be. That never got restored.
So it's
So-
67 of the second number you gave me.
Correct. So we're
Okay, all right,
67.
that's what I want to know. Okay.
Yeah, so sorry for the confusion. We're 67% spent on the 872 figure.
I mean, the problem is not only is it generated by staff that are out, because now you have to use overtime, but the amount of overtime you now have to work with is smaller than you anticipated.
Correct,
It's almost like a finance generated problem.
correct. Yeah, and then the increased call volume also, that has a part of it as well. So
Okay.
guys being out, the reduction in
Yeah,
overtime
okay.
and the increased call volume.
Yep.
Thank you. So anyway, you can see we're on track for salaries. We've expended 50%, so we're on target for that. And you'll see at the bottom, we've asked for a little bit more in the expense account, and we've identified a few things for that. If you go to the next slide, please. So we're currently in negotiations with the fire union. So that's going to be a change in the budget once that contract is settled. Planned retirement for 2 employees. The expense budget, we were looking for a $10,000 increase. What we identified was we have Verizon expenses, which are air cards that are in the ambulance. We track the ambulances and fire apparatus on the large screen in our dispatch center. We have been doing that for several years. But we realized that that bill, for some reason, was being paid out of our donation account. And I don't know how that ever happened. It slipped under the radar from the deputy and I, but we identified it. And we'd like to get that out of the donation account and put that into the regular operating budget where it belongs. The other issue we have is a lockbox program. So we have lockboxes on households and businesses. So when we go there in the middle of the night, either for a medical call or a fire call, we have the keys in the lockbox on the exterior of the building, and only the fire department personnel have that key to unlock and get into your house. So say you slipped and fell and you live by yourself, and unfortunately you had a slip and fall in the bathroom and you broke your hip, and we got a call for a medical. We wouldn't have to break your door down to get in to get you to the hospital. So the lockbox program has been a great success in this town for years. Same thing with businesses. We go to automatic fire alarms in the middle of the night at 2 o'clock in the morning at a business. We don't have to force entry to get in. We can just unlock the lockbox. We usually set off the burglar alarm, but that's part of the deal. But anyway, the lockbox program, again, that was being paid out of the donation account. It's a self-funded thing, so we don't make any money on them. We basically buy them and sell them to the people. We go out and install them for free and put the keys in the box, and the money would go back into the general fund. So we're just looking to move that also out of the donation account. Next, please. So challenges. Staffing, we've had a couple of studies done here, and we're getting there slowly. We've increased 4 with the last grant. We're hoping to increase another 4 with this up and coming grant. But both the studies said that we needed to increase our staffing by 16. So that's 4 personnel per shift. So we currently are at a 15-man group. The study said we needed to be at an 18-man group. So we're 25% of the way there so far with the 4 that we've hired with the last SAFER grant. So we're hoping, we'll get the grant this next time, and we'll be able to add 4 more and get us a little bit closer to that 18 threshold, which is for the call volume that we're doing today with today's numbers. And again, these are going to go up again next year and the year after. We still don't have enough staffing to handle the call volume that we're doing. The bullet number 2, the move dispatch to station 3 and have a director of communications. I think I spoke on that earlier. We are vulnerable between the flood zone and a small dispatch where we are in South Yarmouth here with 2 consoles in there. To move to Station 3, which was intended to do when they built that station in 2007. That's why that 4,000 feet of open space upstairs was made. Administrative offices and dispatch was all supposed to move to Station 3, and it never got finished. And here we are, several years later, and we're still talking about the same issue. That building is a Hurricane 3 proof masonry building, and it's was very well built. And like I said before, as far as dispatch goes, we need to be protecting our 911 system, because when the disaster happens, whether it's hurricanes or tornadoes or whatever it may be, at the end of the day, the 911 system has to still be operating, and we need to be able to dispatch our personnel to emergency calls. The next bullet is the captain in the car.
And,
So-
and Chief, could I back you up for a second to the first bullet?
No, sure, go ahead.
So I notice as I'm going through the budget book that there's nothing in here that identifies how much we're getting in the SAFER grants. And I would just like to see for future budget years, how many staff we're carrying, how much that cost is, that if we were to lose those grants, what that would mean. Because that is a little unclear to me right now.
So we currently have funded the 4 positions that were from that SAFER grant by increasing the ambulance fees and the slight reduction in overtime. Combining those two, when the grant expires, those 4 positions are fully funded in the budget,
Okay.
based on the ambulance fee increase and the reduction in overtime that not the 50,000 I'm talking about, but we were at 1,122,000 originally before the 4 got hired. 200 of that was pulled out. That's why we went to 922 in anticipation of when the grant expires, plus the ambulance fee increase. Combining those 2 items together, that funds those 4 positions when the grant expires. So
But
we're
Chief,
on.
if you're looking to get another, 8 people that you're looking to hire over the next few years, I mean, are you planning on raising the ambulance fees enough to cover 8 people? Or I'm just trying to figure what are you proposing, or do you have an idea at this point of how you would
Oh.
cover that once the grant money goes away?
Yeah, so the next one will be fully funded for 3 years with no cost share to the town. So we'd be liable for the 4th year.
Yeah.
If we were awarded that. And again, we would reevaluate. When we raised the ambulance fees last time, we're not the most expensive transporting ambulance company by any means. We were at the very low end of the scale, and now we're up into about the middle of the pack. So there's still room to raise it a little bit more. But the ambulance fund can't pay for every increase in this department. It won't sustain that and pay for our capital, because right now it pays 100% of the capital and funds 12 or now 16 positions already. $1 million, I believe $1.5 million, thank you, Deb, comes out of that and goes to wages from that ambulance fund. And that leaves us about $500 to $600 a year to buy a new ambulance and equipment and a new pumper. So to tax that even higher to fund more positions down the road, it might be a little bit difficult, because a majority of our customers are Medicare, Medicaid. So we're not getting the full amount of what we bill.
Yeah, I'm not recommending it. I'm just trying to
No.
get a sense of what
And
other options are available.
Deputy, jump in.
Obviously,
Feel free to
more
jump
money
in, Deputy,
appropriated,
too.
but-
Go ahead,
I just
Jeff.
wanted to add, Stephanie, that we kind of have a formula that is working for us for increasing when the time is right. So we have a procedure, like this past summer, we had the hearings to raise the ambulance fees in anticipation of getting the SAFER grant last year. But we didn't get the SAFER grant last year, I believe, because we already were under a SAFER grant. This next year, so that's all in place. That increase is already going into the reserve for appropriation account. Once you hire the additional 4 people, like the next 4 people, it offsets the overtime. So you take that overtime, dump it into salaries, and then up the ambulance fee money going into salaries, and it pays for the 4. So we've always been tasked with, if you want to increase staffing, find a way to fund it. And this is our formula. We also have finance does a I forget what it's called, the Medicare reimbursement. The what?
Medicare reimbursement.
Yeah, Medicare reimbursement formula on depreciation of apparatus, a whole bunch of things go into it. Rich Bienville used to do it. Now Maria does it. We got over $200,000 when we right before we did our fees to raise our fees. It was like between the two hearings, boom, we got approved for that much more money to go in. So that also would help to offset that increase in salaries. So right now, like the chief said, we're at 1.5. So when we increase 4 more firefighters, it's going to be fully funded for 3 years. After that 3 years, we'll have been, we're all ready to fund those positions going forward before we ever hire them. So it's a good formula that works for us.
Okay. I mean, it sounds like it
confused.
works, it works up to a point, right?
Right, it works up to a point, and what triggers it is, where is that overtime savings? Where does that, so the next 4, I'm not saying we can do this every year, but we know what we need to get. We need to get to 18 per shift, and everything's a pie in the sky. This is what's recommended. We know we need to be there. We'll always work to get there, but how do we get there? So the next 4, we might have to wait 4 or 5 years before we go that next step. It's when is that overtime savings going to equal enough to balance the formula out? The only other way is to go back to do like an override, and we all know nobody wants to do an override. So that kind of works for us. We're very fiscally responsible about it, and I get a pretty good presentation on it. If you'd like me to send that to you, it's kind of interesting.
That would be great. So all right. So it sounds like you've got a plan to manage that. It's just helpful for us to have numbers to kind of get a sense of that. Okay. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, Chief.
No, no
Slaney.
problem. No problem at all. I had to mute because we just got a 911 call as we're speaking here. We just had a medical come in, so someone was
I
yelling
heard.
on the speakers. I had to mute everything. Okay, so next is the positions that we'd love to add to the department. That these are definitely needed positions. Currently, the captain who's in charge of the 3-station operation and dispatch rides the apparatus. Okay, he's not in his own vehicle. He can't go to a scene and set up formal incident command. He has to do it from the apparatus. The bad thing is when he's on the second ambulance call out of station 1 and he's on his way to the hospital driving the ambulance down Route 28, and the dispatch center is calling him to make command decisions for other emergencies in the town. It's not very safe, and it's not a good way to operate. And at the size of the department we're at now, he really needs to be a shift commander, and he needs to be in his own vehicle in order to manage the incidents in the town, set up a formal incident command system on his arrival before the deputy and I get there. Now, during the day, the deputy and I, we have command centers in our vehicles. We'd be able to show up and do that incident command function. But at 2 o'clock in the morning, it's going to take us a little bit of time. We just had a structure fire the other night at 3 o'clock in the morning, and it takes time, but to get up and then get dressed and get in your vehicle and drive there. Meanwhile, these guys are already there and they're already operating. The captain is standing out in the front yard, with a clipboard trying to manage a very challenging, difficult incident. So what we'd like to do is get him off the truck and into his own vehicle so he can better manage the day-to-day operations and emergencies for this town. And a lot of the towns are doing that. They've all, anyone with multiple stations, Falmouth, Sandwich, Centerville, Osterville, Marston's Mills, even Hyannis with only 1 fire station, have taken their captains and put them in the command vehicle in order to institute the incident command function. It's much safer for the operations of the department and the personnel. So that's a big one. And with this next 4, hopefully that we get, we should have enough, because I can't rob the captain off the shift from going on medical calls without replacing him. So what we're hoping is this next 4, we would be able to pull the captain off the truck and put him in his own vehicle as an incident commander. The next function would be a training captain. Right now we have a lieutenant EMS training supervisor who is completely overwhelmed just with the EMS and COVID and everything else he's dealing with. So unfortunately, our fire training is a little bit put back on the shifts, and they do the best they can, But again, they're doing 20 calls per day, average, 35 in the summer. So their training is interrupted all day long. And they don't really have, a training captain would be able to help in that function and be able to set up a lot of stuff off duty, which we have our training funds for, to do training off duty with guys. The EMS supervisor is, like I said, he's wearing a multitude of hats, doing the best he can, but he's only one person. So the next position, the fire prevention officer, we currently have a captain and a lieutenant in the fire prevention office. They're both very, very busy. They're a day position as well as like the training officer is. So they're available to go to emergencies as well if they're not out doing inspections. The fire department, we really could use a heavy truck mechanic. And I know you had a question about that, Stephanie, with regards to that. And I would love if the highway department had the time or in the qualified mechanics. And I'm not saying that to be negative, that they're very qualified to work on the dump trucks and the loaders. To work on fire apparatus, you have to have, which isn't too difficult to get, but they have this thing called an EVT. I don't know if you can see it. I'll hold it up. It's an EVT certification, which I downloaded. And this is what all the fire department mechanics have to have this certification in order to work on fire apparatus. I don't know if you remember years ago, there was a very, very bad accident, a fatal accident in Boston where a ladder truck lost its brakes going down a very steep hill, and the lieutenant on that ladder truck was killed. A lot of this EVT certification, so you're qualified to work on emergency vehicles, came about from that car accident. So it's not that our highway guys couldn't do it. It would be, they would have to go out and get the necessary certifications, and they've got a great facility over there. They put a beautiful lift in that'll lift our big ladder truck up off the ground, which is fantastic. So if we were able to get our own heavy truck mechanic, it would be great, because I'm not sure if they'd be able to handle with the two mechanics. I think there's only one right now. They're trying to fill the second position. With the only two mechanics, they've got a big fleet of their own they're maintaining. I think if they add our fleet to that, I think it would overwhelm them just with the two of them.
So Chief, how is it being handled right now then? If
So we're
DPW
outsourcing. We have a mobile mechanic that comes to the station and does things, two of them actually. And then we send the truck out either back to the dealership, which is not very efficient. It's in Walpole on Route 1, which costs us overtime to drive the truck up there and then go get it and bring it back. So there's a lot of stuff that we could do in-house. Again, Station 3 is big enough that we could use the very back corner bay as a mechanics bay if we had to, and if something major was to go on, we could ask if we could go across the street to the highway barn and use that big lift to pick up the ladder truck, which was great thinking on their part to add that lift into their building. And that was huge. But again, and if we hired a mechanic, we could put him over at highway as well, which I wouldn't be opposed to. And he would primarily work on our apparatus, but if we had nothing, which we never do, not have nothing broken, but if we ever did have nothing broken, he could help out with other town vehicles. So
well, that kind of leads to my second question is, would you need
Yeah.
a full-time position?
yes, it would be a full-time position. Our fleet is, we have 6 pumpers, a ladder truck, 5 ambulances, and at least 10 other either brush trucks or utility vehicles, pickup trucks, SUVs, trailers, boats. We have, it's a huge list to maintain, and we're outsourcing all of that. And we only have $75,000 in our vehicle maintenance account. So a lot of things get put off, unfortunately, or we have to rob from other accounts because we don't have enough money. And as the police chief said, tires. Well, a fire truck tire now has gone from $500 to $600 to $900 to $1,000. So put 10 tires on the ladder truck, that's $10,000 out of that $75,000 gone right out the door. So it's been a very tough challenge to try to keep the primary apparatus. The reserve apparatus, we had one pumper we couldn't fix for over a year because it needed about $20,000 worth of repairs, and we ended up getting some money, I think, out of free cash to fix that. But I only have 75 to play with. I got to maintain the ambulances and the primary engines that go out every single day. But it's good that we have the reserve trucks, because when one of the primaries breaks, the reserve truck steps right up and we don't miss a beat.
Okay, and I noticed that police, I believe, was also interested in a mechanic as well, so it might
I
be
think
worth a
police,
combination.
I believe police have a mechanic currently. I could be wrong. You'd have to check with Rich. I believe there is a police mechanic currently right now. They've had
And-
one.
Sorry, and just the other question is, who do you outsource? Do you outsource to another town, or do you outsource to a company right
No,
now?
companies, yeah. It
Okay.
either goes back to the dealerships, which are in North Attleboro or Walpole, or we go to a heavy truck place in Chatham called Missouri Truck.
Oh,
And,
okay. That's an old Cape Cod name.
Yep, so they work on, primarily, they don't do a lot of the pump work, like the pumpers need a specialized trained person to do the services on the pumpers. When it comes to the pump components themselves, you can't just have a regular mechanic do that. And they have to be pump tested every year as well, so.
So my last question on this topic is, do other towns have on-staff mechanics, or do they also tend to outsource?
Yeah, so
Okay.
just off the top of my head, I know for a fact Dennis has two mechanics. Hyannis has a full-time mechanic. Centerville, Osterville, Marston's Mills has a full-time mechanic. Falmouth has two mechanics. Sandwich has a mechanic. Bourne has a mechanic. And I think that's it. That's just off the top of my head. I'm sure there's others.
Wow. Okay,
So with the size fleet that we have, we should have had one years ago.
yeah.
We really should have.
Yeah, that it certainly sounds like it. There goes my idea, which was, if we invested in a good mechanic, could we then outsource, be the people that other towns outsource to?
Well, it's very interesting you said that, Stephanie, because that's how my friend Mike Kelleher, who's the Foxborough Fire Chief, he does exactly what you just said. His full-time mechanic works on some of the surrounding departments, and they bill those fire departments, and it pays for his mechanic. So that's certainly an option. But with as many full-time mechanics that are out there right now, actually Barnstable Village has a full-time mechanic as well.
You're kidding.
Yeah, but he's also a firefighter and he runs calls as well. He
Yeah.
does both roles. He's not just strictly turning wrenches. He's also a firefighter EMT. But yeah, though the Foxborough's got a great model, and they basically paid for their mechanic by outsourcing and bringing in other towns' apparatus and working on them.
I would be really curious to see what some of the outer Cape towns do, because if I would generally think that if there's a town that's not going to have a mechanic and would need to outsource it, it's going to be a town on the outer Cape.
Yep.
So I think that would be really interesting to see, and then take a look at what the numbers would be of what we could potentially generate and what we could potentially, what we would have to pay for the mechanic. So
And with
thank you for
regard-
going down the rabbit hole with me on that.
No problem. But I'll just give you an example. So a lot of times the deputy can attest to this as well. A lot of times, because we're so busy, and there's one of our ambulances, our fire apparatus are getting fixed at Missouri's. Every single time we go the Missouri truck, there's fire apparatus there from other towns. There's Brewster, there's Provincetown, there's Wellfleet, there's Eastham, Orleans. They all have apparatus, either ambulances or fire trucks there. So they're working on a lot of the town's departments. Chatham's there all the time, obviously being right in their backyard. Harwich once in a while, but I think Harwich has a guy now that they qualified at their DPW that's been doing a lot of their work. So it's certainly an option again, I don't know how that would work, but they added another mechanic at the DPW in Harwich to handle the fire stuff, but he also works on DPW stuff too.
Okay. Thank you. Please
Hey,
continue. Oh, I'm sorry, George. Go
Any
ahead.
other
I just want to comment on the last point. I was thinking, yeah, this makes a lot of sense if we're the furthest east. All the towns you mentioned are to the west of us. Any of those that are on the outer Cape are going to have to come through us. But here's the problem. Who's your competition? Well, it's this company in Chatham,
Yeah,
and they have the ability to, or an interest in servicing not just fire vehicles, but other large vehicles.
yeah.
So that, I think this should be pursued, but that gives me some reservation. If that's who we have to compete with, now you're just talking Brewster, Harwich, Dennis, because everybody else has to drive through Chatham to get to us.
Yeah,
And-
So.
Price is also a factor though, when you're looking at competition.
Right.
So,
And then Cape Cod Truck, which is a heavy truck place also and that's on the Orleans Brewster line.
Okay.
The departments go there as well.
So there's
So,
more competition. Okay.
yeah, and they're a vehicle inspection place, so they go there for their inspections and then they do mechanical work on to make them pass inspection. So I think it would be difficult. It's a great model, like I said, up in Foxborough. He's making it work up there. You know, my next door neighbors in Dennis, they have 2 mechanics, you know, so we wouldn't be getting anything from them. Harwich, like I said, they have their DPW guy, they certified one of their guys at DPW to work on the fire apparatus, which was a smart thing to do.
I don't want to suggest that we create a committee to look at this, but, you know, it would be useful to see whether or not in town, so I'm not talking about going outside, but in town, is there a way to use resources of highway, police, and fire, and somehow combine a maintenance, you know, as option 1, option 2, is there a way to put it all in Yarmouth and sell it outside, and then 3, well, you know, I don't know what 3 is, but it just. we
just
oughta
add a
look-
mechanic and what are the numbers associated
Yeah,
with the options?
I would encourage the 3 departments to go out and buy a beer and talk about it, because I think there's something that can be done. Trying to do it individually probably is not the wisest thing to do. That is each of the 3 departments. But
Yeah,
could
well,
I ask a different
go ahead.
question?
Go ahead.
On the moving the dispatch center, I mean, the building's there. I assume the wiring is already in. So what's it gonna cost us to move over? And why haven't we done it?
It's a great question. I don't know what today's figures would be because of obviously everything's up, way up overpriced.
Yeah, give me a
material-wise.
wild ass guess.
So, I mean, I hate to even shoot the number, but the number years ago, they were planning because we have to put an elevator in and make it handicap accessible. The shaft the area is there for the elevator, but you still got to put that, which is a significant cost. They were anticipating about 1 million to $1.1 million to move up there. Everything is up there. It's roughed. There's no walls. So it's basically, you take the 4,000 square feet and you just petition off your rooms and you have a big open area for dispatch. You have another room for either a training / emergency operations room. You have a breakout room for, you know,
Yeah.
bathrooms. You have to put bathrooms in, but everything's up there. It's roughed and it's ready to go. It
All right,
just
do we
needs
know
to be-
what we'd save if we combine the 2 dispatch functions?
I don't
Over
believe,
10 years?
I don't know if there's gonna be a huge amount of savings there combining them. Because you're still gonna have to have 3 dispatchers working all the time. I can't drop down. I should have 2 right now doing 7,500 calls a year. I only have 1. But I'm generating enough run volume today that warrants 2 dispatchers, especially in the daytime.
So there really is no savings except we'd go in one place?
I mean, we looked at it before. You're gonna have some increases because the police dispatchers make more than the fire dispatchers, so they're gonna need to be brought up by combining. There's a lot of variables there.
Yeah.
That need
I'm
to be
assuming
looked at.
you've looked into this. There's
Yeah,
so many
we-
questions. You know,
Deb, do you have anything to add, Deputy?
I was just gonna say that even the last study, it was more looked at out of safety and response times than it was about money. That there is no, you need the same number of people with the same computer programs doing the same thing. They would just be in one building. I mean, you would save money. We both need a supervisor. It's very intense to the amount of work that goes in managing grants. We have the same thing. DC Lennon managed all their grants for years, and I manage all of ours. It's a lot of work to manage. It's great to get the grants, but somebody has to manage them. So that instead of having 2 supervisors, you would have 1 supervisor, and you would have a better, more robust facility.
All right,
I just want to do a time check. We're at almost 7:45, and I know we want to
We're pretty
get through
close.
any other questions.
Okay. So I can finish.
The one thing though that we need to think about is also, like Phil was saying, if 911 goes down, the whole town's shut. You know, I mean, we could sell the thing on a safety issue. I mean, how
Yeah.
many people would want to call up and, sorry, phone line's down, we can't get you an ambulance, or we can't get you police.
Yep, good point.
Thank you, Nate.
Good point, Nate.
Okay, the next bullet was our training budget. So for years, we've been instructed that I can't spend the full amount in the training budget because with that $50,000 reduction that we had that we never got restored, I had to steward the training money in case, like this year, if I'm over on overtime, I have to shift the training overtime to cover the general overtime. So one of two things, it would be great to get another 50 in the training budget for the future, but I think more importantly, the 50 should be restored to the general overtime for emergency responses and shift coverage. Either one would be great, because if I get the 150 but don't get the other one, I'm going to shift this 50 when I need to fill that overage, which is going to happen. And the next bullet is the COVID, has created a significant overtime expense between, same as the police, either with the members on the floor going on calls or in dispatch. And we have 7 qualified firefighters that cover the dispatch along with the 4 dispatchers. So we have a pool of 11 to choose from there, but 7 of them are firefighters that are going on calls primarily. But if they're off duty and one of the other 3 dispatchers doesn't take the shift, then it goes to the firefighters, and then they fill the vacancy.
This is a one-time event, though. COVID goes away, that goes away.
Well, the overtime's still going to be there. You know, it's still going to be there, but it's not going to be as bad. The COVID has made it increase significantly.
Right. You know,
Um,
always gonna have
because-
sick people, but.
Yeah, I mean, they're
Someone's
still
gonna
going to
get
have
the flu.
guys and girls are going to use their vacation and their personal time and
Yeah,
sick time.
yeah.
So that's still going to generate overtime. But this COVID thing has really
Exacerbated
increased
it.
it. Yes, and it really has amplified it. Next bullet is to increase our expenses, protective clothing and EMS supplies. As you might know, everything is gone through the roof, like masks, everything we have to buy now, normal consumables. The companies have really decided, and maybe it's not their fault because of the whole big supply chain thing that's going on worldwide, but they've jacked up everything on us, and we've been absorbing it ever since COVID started, and we've had some help with some extra funding here and there and grants and whatnot. But at some point, when that stuff goes away, they're not going to reduce their protective stuff back down to where it was. It's going to stay at the level or even go up more. So we'd be looking to increase that line item. If we could, that would be great. Any questions on this slide? Okay, next one, please. So recommendations would be, what we've been doing, which is increasing the shift strength at 4 at a time and utilizing the SAFER grant program that the federal government do. That's been a manageable thing, and we've been able to cover the costs so far. We would be looking to increase and continue to do that model, as the deputy said. We'd love to budget the move upstairs to Station 3 and be in a protected building. The captain in the car, as we talked about, increased staffing if we're allowed to, with the training officer, fire prevention, dispatch, director of communications, and the mechanic. And SAFER grants us to support the shift increase, as we talked about. Sorry for the typo in that last slide. And next one. That's it. Thank you very much for your time. I tried to get in here under the gun as quick as I could.
We appreciate it. Any other questions from the committee members for the fire department?
I have 2 brief questions, and the first one is, who's the grantor for the SAFER grant? What department in the federal government?
That's FEMA.
FEMA, okay.
FEMA,
And
yep.
The second question is, when you apply for these grants, do you include an amount for the administrative costs? Because I've heard 2 or 3 complaints about how much time it takes to administer them.
I'll let the
I'll give you an
deputy,
example. In my own experience, in the academic world, if you apply for a grant, you add everything up that you say it's going to cost you to do the grant, and then you multiply that by 1.4 or 1.48, I think is the last time I did it. And that means 48% of the grant is added on top for the university's administration. So do we do
FEMA
that?
I'll let the
FEMA
deputy, the
FEMA
deputy will
doesn't,
answer that.
sorry, FEMA doesn't allow that. What
Okay.
FEMA, well, the grants in the past, they used to at least fund new firefighting gear, which is very expensive. So you put on 4 people, and then you're like, oh my God, I'm gonna need another $12,000 for gear, and we got new guys, we can't get them gear. So years in the past, they used to fund gear. They don't even do that anymore.
Well, I guess what I'm getting at, they're requiring you to make reports. I mean, you're complaining about having to do all this paperwork, and yet they don't support that activity. I don't get
What-
that.
What they do support, which is pretty good, is salaries and benefits. So it's not just what it costs, it's the town's costs towards health insurance. All that comes back to the town, at least in this next round, at 100%.
Okay.
Previous, so it's just one of those things. There is a, if somebody helps you write the grant, like if you have a grant writer, you can use whatever that fee is, you can apply for that. But as far as managing it,
unfortunate.
It's myself and the administrative assistant
Okay.
pull my hair out trying to, because you got to do it quarterly, and you got to figure out how much you paid, and does this guy's wife have insurance, and they have a less, the numbers aren't always the same, and you got to figure it out. It's just a process that takes up some time.
Okay.
Okay.
I think so. I think we have that question answered. One last question from me is just with regard to the buyouts. The numbers seem really big. And is that related to retirements? Can you provide some context around that?
Yeah, we have to anticipate anyone that's maxed out, myself included. We have to anticipate that, they could come in and say, hey, I'm going to retire in 3 months. And if we don't budget for that throughout the years, so we've got members that are maxed out that could retire tomorrow if they want. They're actually here. They've been here longer than they need to be, but they love the job like I do, and they've stayed longer than, like I maxed out 2 years ago. So I could have left at 53 back 2 years ago. But yeah, that's why you see that that increase. It's going to fluctuate up and down. If we get to a point where there's not that many guys that are at that threshold, that figure wouldn't be there.
And is that vacation or sick time?
So there's a buyout for vacation and sick when you retire.
And is there? Well,
And that's
I'll
in the-
just- I
that's
guess
in the
I'll leave it as a statement rather than a question because of the time. But I would just say to Bob and Bill, just kind of like looking forward at future union contracts. My understanding is that states and lots of other governments have instituted practices where you can't roll over sick time, from one year to another, and that is something that can help ameliorate that big shock to the budget that happens. And I'd love to see us take a look at that.
Yeah, right now the guys can't accumulate more than 155 sick days total in their whole career, and they're only allowed to sell 90 of those back. So we have it capped right now.
Yeah, it's still some big numbers. Okay, any other questions for the fire department? Okay, I will entertain a motion to recommend the budgets for both departments as proposed.
I'll make the motion.
Second?
I'll second.
Second. Nate's seconding. Okay. All those in favor, George,
All right.
Robert,
Aye.
Nate,
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you very
Um,
much.
Bill, given the time constraints, do you want us to switch to budget transfers next? You're on mute.
Always forget about that. I have the transfers up there. There is one transfer to make an adjustment for the new DPW facility property insurance. And it's 29,905. And the other one is for a position, health department position, and it is $3,000. Both have been signed by both the town administrator and the chair of the Board of Selectmen.
So Bill, the question that I had on this is the second one. It says the transfer will fund the contract through the end of April 2022. My question is then what happens? Is that included in the FY23 budget for that particular individual?
I'm not sure. I was wondering if Bob could you answer that?
They're currently actively recruiting for that position. So, and we've been sort of carrying these expenses throughout this fiscal year so far in this department. And we're extending it out through the end of April, hoping that we're successful in our recruitment. But at the end of April, if we still don't have that position filled, we may seek an additional transfer to take us through to the end of the fiscal year, but this keeps the program going, at least for now.
So is the health department budget though, including for that position that you're recruiting for then? So
Yes,
that you wouldn't need to do anything. Okay.
correct.
All right. Got it. Thank you for clearing that up. Any other questions for Bob on these? Okay. I'll entertain a motion to approve both as submitted.
I'll make the
I'll
motion.
approve them.
Second,
Okay. All those in favor, Robert,
Aye.
Nate,
Aye.
George,
aye.
I'm an aye as well. Given the lateness of the hour and our need to maintain a quorum, I don't see us being able to do that past 8 o'clock. So I think unless, Bill, there's anything else you want to try to squeeze in the next 3 minutes, it might make sense to entertain a motion to adjourn.
No, I think that we can postpone the minutes. That was the last thing really on the agenda. And everybody has them. It'll give you more time to review them. They are sort of a backlog because they maybe have not been brought to your attention to the Finance Committee, and they're from last year. So we're trying to clear the slate and get them all done at once rather than incrementally doing them. So if the committee would take a look at those closely, I know I got some comments from some members. We'll make adjustments. And at the next meeting, we can hopefully approve those as a batch. Your next meeting is the Public Works Department, and all of their separate divisions are in that one evening. So it coordinates it quite well that way.
Bill, one thing I did notice as it relates to the minutes is that there were actually a couple of places where there was a, looking at one, the first one, a motion to approve was made by Jack or Robert ? So she didn't know who made the motion. So I don't think we can approve minutes with a question mark. So that's just one other thing I noticed might need to get cleaned up.
All right.
Motion to adjourn?
Madam Chairman, before you
Yes.
adjourn, can I make just a brief statement while Chief Simonian is still on the line here? I hope he's listening. I know he's turned his video off, but I wanted to let board members know that we've also been notified of Chief Simonian's upcoming retirement as well. And I know we discussed that with the police chief, but I just want to say, first of all, I thought he did a stupendous job tonight. Just great walking everyone through all of the budgets, but he's been with this department since he was 16 years old. And I just want to say I have never been, more honored to work with a chief than Chief Simonian. And when he retires, that's going to be a huge loss for this community. But I thought as you grilled him tonight, we just might want to thank him very much for just everything he's done. And I know there'll be a lot more opportunity to do that, but I just couldn't let it go. And I wanted to personally thank the chief for all he's done, to sort of train me on the operations of the Yarmouth Department. It's a big department. It's very unique, a lot of the operations of it, and he's really invested his time in that. So thank you, chief. And I just wanted to
No,
mention.
my
Thank you.
greatest way to show respect to that is to make a motion to adjourn.
Well, thank. And I'll entertain a second, but I'll also just quickly say, thank you, Chief, and really appreciate everything that you've done for the community as well. I wasn't sure when I saw the buyback, I was like, maybe that's what that means.
Well,
Um,
it made it really hard for me to say that a lot of that money was mine, and that's why I didn't really want to go down that road, 'cause-
I didn't
I-
call
I
out
did-
any specific details for that reason.
Yeah,
but-
so I kind of just, I'm not gonna make it, I didn't want to say, oh, yeah, that's because I'm retiring and that huge amount of money is mine. I didn't want to say that, so.
And when is your retirement date?
March 18th coming up.
March 18th, so soon. Okay,
Soon.
well, this is probably the
Well-
last time you're in front of us. Thank you.
Yep,
coming
and
before
I'm
us all these
very
years.
happy to have served this town and this department. And I moved here from Arlington in 1975, and I was hanging around the fire stations in Arlington when I was a little kid. We delivered oil there, and I got such a hook to it. And then I found out when I was 16, when I moved here in 75, that I turned 16 at 83. I got on the department here, and I've been so fortunate to be able to climb the ladder all the way to chief with a bachelor's and a master's and everything else, and chief officer certifications and everything I've done. It's been a great career, and I love this town. I'm from this town. It's my home. I'm not going anywhere. I'm always going to be here to help this town and help my deputy chief. And I'm hoping he gets my job when I go, and I'm always going to be here for him as a resource and whatever the town needs.
Well, thank you. Congratulations.
Thanks, chief.
I believe we do have a motion to adjourn. I don't
Alright.
think it's been seconded yet.
I'll second it.
All right, all those in
So the
favor?
spy ponder can get home to,
All those in favor, Nate,
Yes.
Robert,
I
George,
I.
I am an I as well. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for your time this evening, and stay safe tomorrow.
Thank you.
Bye now.